Hi, and welcome to our video on drafting, and the last video in this series. In this video we're going to show you how to create a drawing just like this one, and walk you through some of the tools that are going to help you round out the final stages of your project. So let's go ahead and get started. Now I'm in the drafting tool already, but let's look at how I got in here. So first thing I can do, I'll just jump back over into my dashboard here, is you could go through and you could find the drafting tool in the 3D modeling section of the compass. Just coming down here, there's the drafting app right there. But this is actually not the way that I would tell you to access this tool. The best way to create these drawings is to do so within the context of your assembly. So what I'm going to have you do is open your full assembly in the Assembly Design app, which I already have up. And as we create the drawings, we're just going to insert them within the context of the assembly so that they can show up within that little blue chair section here with the 3D geometry of the part. This is a great way to organize your drawings so they're simply within the context of all the other information related to just that part. So let's go ahead and do that. Now I already have that example drawing located within this part, but we're going to create a second one in there anyway so that we can walk through this process together. Now those of you who have seen the assembly simulation and exploded views video will already have kind of a taste of how this drafting tool works. If you're looking to create those assembly views for your project, please go back and review that video. I'm not going to cover that type of information here so that we can focus on the more detailed information that you're going to want to provide for an individual part. That being said, what we need to do first is open this individual part in a new tab so we can just focus on its geometry. So what I'm going to do is double click on the blue chair section here. Right click on that and go to Boom Support Object, open a new app. And that's going to open it in a separate tab here at the top of the screen. And there's that part. Now this is a fairly complicated part, so we're going to have some fun creating the dimensions on this. So now we're ready to create the drawing. I'm going to come up here and just right click on that definition up here at the top, go down to Insert and say Drawing. And that's going to pop into the tree right here. I'm going to rename that. Simply Boom Support. You could say Boom Support Drawing. And we're going to want to rename these drawings so that when you're looking through your 3D space widget on your dashboard, you can recognize which one's which. And now I can go ahead and open it just by double clicking on it, and it'll open that in a new tab as well. We're going to be jumping between these two tabs as we work with the information. Alright, so here's the blank drawing. Let's go ahead and give it a background. I'm going to go to Page Layout here in the View Layout section, and it's just going to give me some templates. We're in the ISO standard now. If we want, we can go and change it to ANSI. It just depends on how your project works and how your sponsors or your coaches want you to report this information. I'm just going to leave it in ISO for now. Moving on, we can come down here and we can insert these template background and title block just by selecting this button here. Now generally that's going to work well enough for you. If you want, you can come in here and you can edit the size of the template, which is generally faster than trying to create a new one from scratch. So we're going to go ahead and insert those. Notice there's also a revision table that I'm not going to worry about in this video. Now we're working with an A0 size paper, which is by all accounts massive. Within the international standards, your A4 is roughly the size of your piece of paper, with an A3 being about the size of a B sheet of paper and so on. So this is a massive page, but I'm going to use it anyway because it helps me illustrate some of the scaling tools that we also have at our disposal. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. We're going to accept that as our layout. Now we're ready to start adding views to this drawing. So I'm just going to add a front view to start. Going to come down here, select front view. This is in the View Layout section still. And then I'm going to have to jump back over to my model so that I can grab the view that I want. Now there's a lot of different ways I could do this. I could select a plane and notice it's giving me a small preview in the corner there to show how that's going to show up on the page, or I can just find a flat surface on the model itself and use that. I'm going to use this one because I like that orientation, and there it is on the page. Now notice when I inserted this as my first view, it's also giving me the option to rotate and shift between the different views that I can use for this model as well. You can drag this little dot around, and that'll help you position this exactly how you want it on the page. I'm just going to click outside to accept that orientation. And there it is. Now notice it did pop in this little axes in blue. Now that's going to show up with each of the views, but you don't really have to worry about it. This item right here won't actually show up in most of the views that we'll be seeing here, and it won't show up in your printed version of this page. Alright, now obviously that's way too small. So I'm going to right click on the side here, go to Properties. You want to search for the View tab here, and then come down to Scaling. And I'm just going to make this a 2:1 scale, so it's twice as big. And that looks a little more reasonable, so I'm just going to drag this over to a better position and accept that. Now that we have our first view, we're ready to start adding some auxiliary views as well. So I just come down to the drop-down menu. We're going to go to Projection. And all I have to do, because I have this view selected, I just have to move off to one side to get a view of whichever projection that's going to be. I'm going to move one up here and just set it there. Now remember, in ISO this is showing the bottom, while in the American standards the top would be shown up here. And that's just a difference in standards. We're going to leave this drawing up here. I can do some other projections. We'll get a top view, and we'll get this side view as well. And there we have a good representation of this part, but that doesn't quite give us the full picture, so we're going to add a bit more to this drawing. The next thing I'm going to do is add an isometric view, and I want to show you one of the pitfalls associated with this. It's the same process. I'm going to select isometric, come back here and select essentially any one of these planes, and that gives us our 3D depiction. But what you'll notice is it's actually showing it in the same position I have it in this viewer. So what you want to do before you add any of those views is make sure that you actually position the viewer to isometric within assembly design so that you can get the view that you're looking for. So I'm just going to come back again. We'll do this again. Isometric, come back here, select any one of these planes, and there we get our view. I'm going to drag it up to the corner here, click outside to accept, and now I'm going to right click on that, go to Properties, and just like before we're going to scale that 2:1. Now we have a much better representation of this part, but one thing that might not be entirely clear yet is whether or not these holes go all the way through the part. The best way to show that is just going to be with a section view of this part. The most common tool for creating a section view is this simple offset section view. There's a lot of other options, a curve, and a line section view. Any of these things that you can do, and you can learn more about these simply by going to the help documentation. But I'm just going to go with offset section view, and we want to get a section that goes straight through the center of this view. Now, an important thing to remember before you select that offset section view is make sure that you activate this bottom view here. Notice when I activate one of these, that axis shows up again on this, disappears from the other views, which just lets you know that it's going to vanish when you actually go and print this page. Now that I have this activated, I can create a section view straight through here. If I tried to do it on a non-active view, it wouldn't actually show up at all. It actually would act as if I was creating a section view all the way down here, cutting through nothing, and really not showing us anything useful at all. So make sure this is active. I'm going to go ahead and create that section view, line it up with that center plane, drag it through, and now I have two options. If I click once, like in the center here, I can click once, offset that line, and offset that section, or I can just drag through. When I'm ready to be done, I'll just double click, and I can drag this view into whatever position. I'm just going to drag it up here, and then we'll move it off to the side. Now it's going to try to force it to stay in line, which is normally what you want to do. In this case, that's not really going to work with the views we have available to us. So I need to make sure I right click on this, go to View Positioning, and say Position Independently of Reference View. That's going to allow me to drag it off to the side here. Now we should have all the views that we really need to do a good description of this part. But I'm going to add one more just to show you the functionality, and it's a detail view. And essentially all I'm going to do is come in here and get a zoomed in image of one of these little screw holes. So I'm going to turn that off first and make sure I activate this view. And then I can come in with the detail view and get right in the center of that circle, draw the circle around it, and it's going to create that reference for me, and I can move that scaled drawing up here, and now it's showing that this is the B view. It's going to order them that way because this down here is the A view, this section view down here. And now we can get that closer up image so we can add that detail to that hole right there. Now that's basically creating each of the individual views. And that's going to cover most of what you're going to want to do, creating views for your drawing. One other pretty common tool is off to the side here. It's simply this auxiliary view that is sometimes useful in creating these descriptions. I'm not going to worry about that now, but this is where you can find that. And there's a lot of different options that you can take advantage of in creating these views, but we'll work with these for now. So let's go on and let's start adding some of the annotations to this drawing. Now, most of what you want to do is in simply these two tabs here. There's also a sketch tab, which just simply gives you all the access of everything in the sketcher in case you need to add a line somewhere or make some other representation somewhere. You're also able to do that here. Keep in mind though that this drawing is actually still connected to the 3D model. So anything that I have pulled from any of these views or pulled directly from the model is going to update anytime I have to make a change to this model. So if I had to make this hole back here a little bit bigger, or maybe separate these two little beams here a little bit more, I can update the model, and with that, that will actually update all of the measurements and the representation over here. So let's move in here, and I'm just going to focus on this front view because there's plenty of geometry there to work with. And I'm going to go to annotation and just start adding dimensions. So I'm going to select that tool, and let's get a length dimension in here. I'm going to select that piece and this one here, and there I have that length dimension. That's in millimeters right there. And I can just move through this piece by piece. I can also double click on this so I can get that radius call out on each of these curves here. For some of the more complicated things, you notice I can move up here, and this is actually a curved section. So if I select that, it's going to try to give me a radius that's going all the way down to the center of this circle. Now that is a massive radius, and it's a massive circle. So that's not really going to be the best way to represent the curvature of that piece there, if that's important. So instead of adding it that way, I'm actually going to just be a little bit clever here. I'm going to come to this text with leader option here, select that bit, and then I can simply type it out just like before, R, whatever it is, 158. And there I have a representative call out of that little feature right there. Now if you want to be very careful with this, we can also come in here and I can do something like note. And that will let me keep track of those measurements that I've put in by hand, because again, if you go and update your model, these types of notes aren't going to automatically update. So adding in a little feature like that will help me kind of keep those separate. And I could just move through and add dimensions on whatever view makes the most sense, and just kind of work through that entire process here. So that's dimensioning. It'll automatically adjust to whatever dimension you want to create. If I did want to come in here and maybe come to this circle here, it's going to assume I want a radius. I can right click on that, go to diameter, and get a diameter call out for that instead. Let's instead though, I want to add one more dimension before I move on. I'm going to select the circle and then select the wall here to get the distance to the center of that circle, and bring that up to the top, and there I get that dimension right there. I'm going to use that in just a little bit to show some GD&T tools that we have access to. Alright, now if I zoom out, you can clearly tell that even though this is a massive piece of paper, and that's actually a normal font for what we're working with here, we might want those to be just a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold down Control, and I can just select whatever dimensions I've created, any of these items. I'll come down here and select that A as well on both of those, the B up here, and I'm going to call that good, and then I'm just going to right click on any one of them, go to Properties, Font, and then I can change that font size to something a little bit bigger. Normally that's not going to be very reasonable for what you're doing, but this will mean that if I zoom out a little bit more, I can actually see a little bit better what those callouts are. And you can move through that way. Holding Control down lets me select multiple of these so you don't have to go through and go into the Properties menu for each one individually. So now we have those callouts. And let's move on to the next stage of creating dimensions, which is doing GD&T. Now, depending on your project, they may or may not care about this tolerancing, but I'm going to show it to you anyway, just in case. So I'm going to select that tool under this datum feature menu. I'm going to select that geometrical tolerance, select on this circle and drag it out. And it's going to pop up this dialog box so we can put in the information. And we're really just going to focus on this field here. So just moving through, I'm going to make this a position callout. And then in here I can add the actual tolerance. So I'm going to make this position callout a certain diameter from the measurement I put on there. So I'm going to add in that diameter and then put 0.03. I can also add in, let's make this a maximum material. Let's come in here and we can also add in some datum values. Now if you don't understand what these datum values are referring to some sort of other thing I had a call out to. In this case, A and B is probably bad because I'm already using that as a call out for some of these views. But you would put that in there and then create the view to the thing that you're referencing. So right there is a GD&T. If I want to add two types of callouts, I just pick the next one. So maybe circularity is the next thing I want to add. And here it just creates a second tab. So I can swap between those two and go through and add the same type of information for that circularity callout as well. Again, you might want to check with your coaches and figure out exactly what they're looking for. That looks pretty good to me, so I'm just going to leave it like that. And that covers the basics of doing your dimensioning, doing your annotation. Of course, you can always come in here and just add some text. So maybe if I just add this in the corner and say, here's some extra info, that works just great. You can also come through and add some other specific callouts. You can add in datum features, just like these kind of datum callouts I put in here. I can add them here. There's a lot of other useful annotation tools. The last one I want to show you with annotation is just this simple centerline tool, which just lets me come in, select a circle, and it'll just add that little callout depending on what standard you're using. They may want that, they may not. Great way to just put that in really quickly. So we've covered the dimensioning now, and that's basically all the tools that you're really going to be playing with working on one individual drawing. The one thing that I haven't covered in this view is just down here at the bottom. We didn't really take a good look at this title block, so we can come in here and look at this now. Now we inserted this by coming in here and going to the page layout tool here, but we can actually just jump in here and work on this simply by double clicking on it, and it will bring up this kind of table view that will let me come in and change the specifics. So I can come in here and I can change this to give the name. This is the boom support. Add some information, who checked it, the date that they've checked it, size of the drawing. Right here I would want to add a scale because I changed the scale on each individual drawing, so change that to 2:1. Weight, drawing number, and sheet. Now depending on what you're doing, it may take multiple sheets to describe one part, which is what you would kind of focus on in here. You could also organize this as one entire drawing package, so maybe you start with the assembly view followed by the exploded view and number your sheets through that way so that you get the entire list of drawings. And that's really up to you how you want to organize that and move through this table here. Now there's one final thing we need to look at here, which is a fairly important part. It's printing the drawing. And to do that, we come up here to the Share button up in the top right, click on that, and you can come down here to Print. And that will let you print the document you're working on. Of course, this is way too big for my printer. I can go to Fit in Page, Fit to some scale, and determine how that's going to fit onto my page. And I can also come down here and preview that drawing. And there, right there, we see that depiction of the drawing that's been placed upon a profile piece of paper there. Obviously the numbers are going to be too small on a drawing that size, but you get the idea. We can also come in here and rotate the image if we want to so that we can get it to fit a little bit better on the page. And I can also come in here and print a multi-page document. Now by default this is simply going to print the page you're looking at. You might want to go through though and print these individually just so that you can check the quality of the work on each of those pages. Now, that covers the drawings. There's just one final point that I want to look at here. Like I said, this drawing, for the most part, is going to automatically update whenever you make a change to your model so that you can be sure that each of these callouts are actually accurate, they're pointing to the right thing. However, it's fairly common in student teams that you print the page and then a little bit later realize, oh yeah, there was one more change or one more other thing that we want to add. It makes it pretty easy to forget and reprint that part. So this is kind of a common problem that students deal with often. And a way to kind of help you with that is once you've had this drawing created and you've had it printed, you've basically said that you've kind of committed to this iteration of your model. And so what you want to do is make it a little bit more difficult to come in here and accidentally change something, forget to print off a new document, and have it be wrong. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to one of the earliest tools I showed you in any of these videos. I'm going to jump back to my dashboard and we're going to use this collaborative life cycle widget that I put on my dashboard very early in this process. Now when I first did this, I basically focused on the fact that this is how you can permanently delete any item from your collaborative space to kind of clear things out that way. But kind of the main function of this widget here is actually to control the position in the product's life cycle that it's located in. And the main change that we'll look at, and really the only one that you should need to worry about as a student, is just moving it from in work to frozen. What this does is it freezes the part so that no other changes can actually be made to the part unless someone comes in here and moves it back to in work. So if I change that maturity up to frozen, it's going to freeze all the geometry, say, no, you can't make any more changes to this part. We've committed, at least to an extent, to what it looks like now. And that will keep you from accidentally putting in changes without realizing that it's already represented on a drawing and you're going to have to reprint. So doing this freezes that. And that way, if you need to come back and you realize you need to make a change, this will help you to keep track of which of the drawings you've already printed. You can come back to this, move it back to in work, and then go back and make those changes and reprint the drawing. And there it goes. With that, we have covered the drafting functionality in 3DEXPERIENCE. We hope you guys enjoyed this video series. We hope it helped you with your project. Please send us feedback. We want to make these as useful to you, as helpful to you as possible. Thanks.